Hi, my name is Belle Townsend, and I'm the author of the book called The Oklahoma Land Run. It's the story of April 22nd, 1889, the year of the land run, and it was the first one. It was the unassigned lands in this area between Purcell and up toward Orlando, over toward Stillwater, and over toward Fort Reno, where the lands were not taken by anyone at that point, and they were free, or almost free, to anybody that wanted to race at the time. Now, the unassigned lands started, the actual race started at 12 o'clock. And you had to improve the land, live on it for quite a few years, if you could, at least 5. To improve the land, you had to either build a place, and sometimes there weren't trees around your 160 acres. Sometimes you had to just use sod house or whatever you could find to live in. You had to either have a garden, a well, or something to show that you had improved the land. Now, if you didn't want 160 acres, you could go ahead and have a lot in town. Now, you had to race for these. The types of transportation included horses. Those who had buggies or carts could go a little faster. If you had a prairie schooner or a wagon or a buckboard, then you could go a little faster than those that were either on bicycles or tried to run on foot. There were even trains available. They were so crowded that people really couldn't move around in them, and people jumped off the train as it was still moving just to try to claim the land. Now, there were Sooners that tried to get the land, and they tried early to get it. That's why they were called Sooners. When you did get the land, you had to go ahead and claim it in either Kingfisher or Guthrie. It took days sometimes for all the paperwork to be done for the standing in line that you had to do. It cost about $14 for that 160 acres. Towns sprang up very quickly. People didn't have money. They didn't have a place to stay. They had only tents. And sometimes there was no food around. If there was food, it was very high priced. Sometimes if you wanted a cup of water, you didn't have a cup, you had to buy it. It was a nickel a cup. You barely had a nickel back then if you had any money. And the cup of water that they gave you came straight from a creek. There were also years in which there wasn't much that you could grow. The land itself sometimes was just a dirt that didn't have any fertilizer of any kind on it, and there was no water. The first year was called the year of the turnip because they did not have any time at all to really produce a lot of food. Everything that they had tasted like turnips because to feed their animals they had to give them turnips. The chickens, eggs tasted like turnips. The beef and the milk that you had from cows tasted like turnips. Now, if you had been there, you might have seen Ben and Bob, my horses here, because they would have been there with Jesse. Jesse was the little boy in the story who had to drive the wagon for his dad. His dad and Mom had wanted this land for quite a while, and they knew that the race was coming up. But a week before, Jesse's dad got hurt. Jesse was only 9. He couldn't really compete against men who were very strong and who raced all the time or had used wagons quite often. His dad kept saying, "No, you can't do it." And Jesse kept saying, "I have to, Dad. That's the only time we can get some land." So, let me show you a few things you would have had if you would have been with Jesse that day. Probably a cup to drink out of, because he would have had to have water during the race. They didn't know how long they were going to race. They didn't know how long it would take to get the land, how far they would have to go. They had to hope that their wagons did not break down. They had to hope that the horses did not become lame. They also might have had a dipper. This would be for dipping food or for drinking out of, if they had one at all. You would have seen Jesse probably in a cowboy hat, because he would have had to have a hat on during that time, because the dust would have been all over his face, and he had to spit out some of that dust. He would have had a scarf. The scarf would have had to cover his face so that he would be able to withstand all the sand from all the horses kicking up all that dirt. And if you had been one of the moms that were along, and sometimes moms did go on this, you would have had a bonnet on. Let me show you a couple of the bonnets I have. This one had to protect women from the sun. If you didn't have any trees and you were out in the sun all day trying to make a garden, you had to have protection for your face. This is just one of the bonnets I have. I have others. This one is an older bonnet, and it again protects your face quite a bit. You had to tie them tight to keep the dust off of you too. And the third bonnet I have is this one. Again, to protect your face. Little girls would have worn them too. I hope you enjoyed Jesse's story, The Oklahoma Land Run. Thank you. Bye.